Hey guys, tonight we're walking barefoot through ancient India, beneath towering banyan trees and along riverbanks that shimmer under moonlight. Incense drifts on the air, soft as breath, while temple bells ring far away, as if from inside your own mind. Tonight, we follow the quiet footsteps of a boy named Siddhartha, born into privilege, destined for greatness, but burdened with an ache no ritual can soothe. This is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, a book of silence, of seeking, of slow-burning transcendence. This book belongs to level 4 of our playlist, Becoming You. Here, the stories are not about conquering the world, but understanding your own soul. They ask, what does it mean to be true to yourself when every path promises something different? What happens when you shed the identity others expect you to wear and step naked into the unknown? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now from somewhere quiet, let me know where you are and what time it is. I'm always curious who's out there wandering through books with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The boy Siddhartha is beautiful, not just in face or form, though both are true. He carries himself with the serene pride of a Brahmin's son, someone raised among chants and wisdom, with the sacred syllables of the Vedas whispered to him like lullabies. His father is a priest, his mother graceful and quiet, and yet Siddhartha's heart is restless. He walks in gardens of mango trees, studies scriptures by lamplight, practices breath control until his chest burns, but something is missing. Something always has been. He knows all the words of truth, but not the feeling of truth. Next to him is Govinda, his shadow, his friend, the moon to Siddhartha's sun. Govinda adores him, follows him. Where Siddhartha looks, Govinda stares. Where Siddhartha walks, Govinda matches step. Together, they're the golden boys of their village. But only one of them burns with that unbearable need to leave. Siddhartha watches the river, hears its eternal murmur, and feels the aching paradox of knowing everything and understanding nothing. He sees his teachers and wonders why their words don't satisfy. They say the Atman, the inner self, is within, but Siddhartha has not found it. They say the soul is eternal, but he feels change, decay, desire. His mind sharpens, and with it comes a terrible clarity. Knowledge is not experience. And so, he goes to his father, bowing low, and asks for permission to leave. He wants to join the Samamas, wandering ascetics who own nothing, who beg for food, who seek truth through suffering. His father says no, at first, but Siddhartha does not move. He stands still all night. A silent rebellion, a respectful defiance. The next morning, his father sees the unbreakable will in his son's eyes, and with quiet sorrow, he lets him go. Govinda, of course, follows. And just like that, Siddhartha walks away from home, away from security, away from everything the world told him he was supposed to be. They find the Samamas in the forest, men who have turned their backs on pleasure and comfort, emaciated, hollow-eyed, silent, and slowly, Siddhartha becomes one of them. He eats once a day, or not at all, sleeps on thorny ground, fastens his mind to the idea of nothingness, seeks to slay the self, the I, through sheer discipline. He learns to forget his body, to leave it behind in meditative trances, to feel hunger and not react, pain and not move, desire and not follow. But still, the self remains. Even in this extreme rejection of the world, the ego clings. Siddhartha feels it like a shadow behind his thoughts. He realizes that asceticism, too, is just another game of the ego, another attachment disguised as detachment. One day, word comes a man, a teacher unlike any other. Gautama, the Buddha, enlightened, awake. And just like that, a new current enters the river of their journey. Govinda is electric with hope. Siddhartha is curious but wary. He's beginning to suspect that no teaching, no teacher can ever replace direct experience. Still, they walk to see the Buddha. They arrive in the grove where Gautama teaches, a place of serene simplicity. The Buddha sits under a tree, a quiet smile on his face. His disciples surround him, hanging on every word. His presence radiates peace, his voice like a river that has finally reached the sea. Govinda is enthralled. For him, the journey ends here. He chooses to stay, to follow the Buddha. And Siddhartha? He listens. He honors Gautama's wisdom. But he sees something missing, not in the Buddha, but in the very idea of following. Gautama has reached enlightenment, but Siddhartha realizes it was not through words, not through teachings. It was through walking his own path, through suffering, through solitude. And Siddhartha must do the same. With deep respect, he thanks the Buddha and walks away alone. This is the moment the real journey begins. Not towards something, but into something, into the self. The world begins to shimmer differently once Siddhartha turns away from doctrines. His feet are still dusty from walking away from the Buddha's grove, but his mind feels clearer than it has in years. For the first time, he is not following anyone. Not his father, not the Sammas, not even the enlightened one. Siddhartha walks into the world without a plan. The forest, thick and warm around him, offers no answers. The sun climbs above the treetops like a silent witness. Birds cry in the canopy. Roots tangle at his feet. And inside, for the first time, there's silence. Not the imposed quiet of meditation, but the organic stillness that comes when desire is momentarily set down. He reaches a river. It flows with the ancient ease of time itself. Siddhartha watches the current, entranced by its eternal song, and he feels new, as if he has just been born. Gone is the ascetic hunger. Gone is the boy who needed approval. Gone is the eager student. This man now is simply present. Crossing the river, Siddhartha steps into a town, a small one, filled with dust and clamor, life and scent. For someone who spent years rejecting the senses, the world feels almost hallucinogenic. Perfume from a vendor's stall drifts past. Laughter rings out from a courtyard. A girl carries a basket of mangoes on her head. And then he sees her. Kamala. Her walk is precise, like poetry in motion. She is a courtesan, wealthy and cultivated. Her beauty is not just physical, it's intellectual, artistic, refined. She lives in a world Siddhartha has never known, one of luxury, elegance, and power through pleasure. And something awakens in him, not lust exactly, but curiosity, a new layer of the self he has not yet touched. He wants to learn love. But Kamala is not easily impressed by barefoot wanderers. She tells him plainly, to be with her, he must have fine clothes, fine shoes, and money. And so, Siddhartha, the former ascetic, decides to step fully into the world. He finds work with Kamaswami, a merchant known for his shrewdness and wealth. It is here that Siddhartha begins to understand another rhythm of life, the rhythm of commerce, negotiation, gain and loss. He learns to read people, to judge risk, to speak the language of coin and contract. But he is never entirely of this world. Siddhartha handles business well, but he doesn't cling to outcomes. Win or lose, he stays balanced. Kamaswami is frustrated by this detachment, mistaking it for indifference. But Siddhartha knows he is merely passing through. And in the evenings, he goes to Kamala. She teaches him the art of love, not just physical, but emotional, psychological. How to listen with your whole body. How to read what is not spoken. How to give without needing to own. Their time together becomes a second education. Through Kamala, Siddhartha learns beauty. Through the market, he learns the ways of the world. And somewhere inside, that quiet observer, his true self, keeps watching. Years pass. Siddhartha grows wealthy, dresses in the finest robes. His house fills with servants, his table with delicacies. He becomes respected, desired, envied, and yet, inside him, something begins to wither. He dreams of the river. He sees himself as a game player, a man intoxicated by luck, by status, by pleasure. At first, it was exploration, but now he's stuck in it, numb. He gambles. He loses. He wins. He sleeps. He wakes. Everything blurs into repetition. He sees old men with wine-stained teeth and young men with empty eyes. He sees the hollow inside luxury, the hunger that no amount of spice or silk can fill. He sees Kamala's beauty aging, though still radiant, and feels time like a slow erosion. And one night, Siddhartha dreams of a dying bird, once caged in Kamala's home, now lifeless on the floor. He wakes with a start, looks in the mirror, and sees a stranger. He walks out, leaves the house, the city, the wealth, the name he's made for himself. Doesn't say goodbye to Kamala, just disappears. And once again, Siddhartha returns to the forest. But this time, he's not seeking anything. He's just empty, completely bone-deep empty. By the river, he sinks to the roots of a tree, exhausted. He thinks of death. The idea tempts him, sweet as sleep. He leans over the river, stares into its darkness, ready to let go. And then, a sound, soft, ancient, inside and outside him. The sacred syllable. It rises like mist from the water. Not a word, but a vibration, a reminder, a remembering. Siddhartha closes his eyes and hears the unity of all things, the rhythm of the cosmos, the echo of something eternal. He doesn't jump, he sleeps, and when he wakes, he is reborn. The river has given him back to himself. The water moves, always in motion, never the same, yet never different. Siddhartha watches it, morning light spilling across its surface, and something ancient within him begins to stir. The man who has tasted denial, indulgence, and despair now stands again at the edge of becoming. This time, without seeking anything, he simply listens. He meets the ferryman again, Vasudeva. The man who had once helped him across now welcomes him without question. Vasudeva is quiet, older, his face lined by years of patient listening. He lives a simple life, tending the boat, guiding travelers, and listening to the river. Siddhartha asks to stay, not as a master, nor even a guest, but as a student, though not in the traditional sense. He wants to learn from the river, and Vasudeva agrees. So begins a new kind of apprenticeship. No texts, no teachings, just the rhythm of days marked by ferrying strangers, chopping wood, tending to the small garden, cooking simple meals, and listening. The river becomes a teacher. Siddhartha begins to notice things. The way the current sings differently at dawn than at dusk. The way a whisper can echo across its glassy surface. How every sound, frog croak, bird cry, splash belongs. The river speaks in metaphors and memories. It teaches him that everything flows, that time is an illusion, that all things are connected. He watches the faces of those they ferry, travelers of all kinds, rich and poor, young and old, lovers and enemies. He begins to see patterns in the eyes of men, to sense the story behind their silences. And all the while Vasudeva listens, not just to them, but to Siddhartha. But Vasudeva speaks little. He offers no opinions, no conclusions, only presence. A presence so deep it feels like the earth itself listening through him. One day, a group of monks arrives by the riverbank. Among them, Siddhartha glimpses a familiar face, Gautama, the Buddha, still serene, still luminous with peace. Siddhartha does not approach. He watches from a distance, and this time there is no urge to follow, only a quiet gratitude, like seeing a reflection from a past life. Time continues, soft and circular. Siddhartha grows older. His face, once proud and angular, softens. His eyes grow deeper, his movements slower. He no longer thinks in terms of gain or loss, of questions or answers. Only presence remains. Then, one day, life comes back in the form of pain. Kamala. She appears at the river, her face older, yet still noble. She walks with difficulty, worn from years of travel, her once lavish robes reduced to earth-toned simplicity. She carries a young boy beside her. Kamala is dying. She had renounced her former life and, upon hearing of the Buddha's passing, had tried to reach his grove. But the journey was too much. She collapses by the river. Vasudeva and Siddhartha carry her into the hut. She rests. She breathes her last, and with her final strength, she tells Siddhartha, the boy is his son. Siddhartha is stunned. He had left that life behind, never imagined it would return in the form of this child, stubborn and frightened, with eyes like his own. A boy born not of desire, but of the world he once tried to forget. After Kamala's death, Siddhartha tries to care for the boy, but the child is unruly, angry, spoiled by city life. He despises the simplicity of the river, rejects the silence. He misses the city, its pleasures, its noise. Siddhartha is patient. He remembers his own youthful arrogance, the ways he defied his father. He tries kindness, firmness, love. Nothing seems to reach the boy. The child sees him not as a father, but as a stranger. Eventually, the boy runs away. Siddhartha is heartbroken, not because of pride or failure, but because of love. It is the first time he has truly felt the sting of attachment, the ache of wanting to hold on when life demands letting go. He walks up and down the riverbanks for days, searching, but the boy is gone. And in his sorrow, Siddhartha finally understands his father. The pain of watching a child leave, the helplessness of loving someone you cannot control. Vasudeva listens, and then, one evening, he takes Siddhartha to the river. Together they sit, and they listen, not to each other, but to the current, the murmur of eternity flowing through reeds and stones. And Siddhartha hears it, the voices of the world, crying, laughing, fighting, loving. The sound is overwhelming at first, a cacophony of everything at once. But then, beneath it, a unity, a single note beneath the chaos. The OM, the eternal word. Siddhartha closes his eyes, and it's as if the river flows through him. He sees that all things are one, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, death and life, that every soul returns, that every path leads to the same place, that love never ends, it only transforms. He weeps, and Vasudeva smiles. The ferryman, whose silence had always held answers, now prepares to leave. His task is complete. Siddhartha is ready, ready not to teach, not to lead, but simply to be. And so Vasudeva walks into the forest, alone, and Siddhartha becomes the ferryman, no longer seeking, no longer waiting, just being. The river continues to whisper, and Siddhartha listens. The days pass without measure, marked only by the movement of the sun across the sky and the soft churn of the ferry's wake. The river reflects everything: clouds, birds, stars, pain, peace, and Siddhartha has learned to see all of it without grasping. Time no longer feels like a straight line to him. It curves. It doubles back. In a single droplet of water, he feels eternity pulsing. He ferries strangers across, quietly, gently, watching their faces as they arrive and as they leave. Some smile, some cry, some carry burdens too heavy to speak of. Siddhartha offers no advice, only silence, only presence, and that presence somehow eases them. One day, a traveler appears at the river, his old friend Govinda. Govinda doesn't recognize Siddhartha at first. His robes are simple, his beard now gray. But when Siddhartha speaks, something in the voice calls out across time, and Govinda sees him. They sit together, two men who once sought truth side by side, now older, weathered by the different roads they took. Govinda speaks of his years with the Buddha's disciples, of teachings, doctrines, rituals. He still seeks, still believes that wisdom lies just ahead, if only he could grasp it. Siddhartha listens, but does not preach. He says little, but Govinda senses that this man has found something, not by chasing, but by surrendering. They talk of the river, of the child Siddhartha lost, of the oneness of all things. Govinda is puzzled. He hears the words, but cannot feel them. And then Siddhartha offers something unexpected. He invites Govinda to kiss his forehead. It's a strange request, intimate, ancient, but Govinda agrees. And in that moment, forehead to forehead, Govinda sees. He sees rivers and stars, and the endless cycle of birth and death. He sees Siddhartha as a child, as a man, as a god, as a tree. He sees himself. He sees everything, not as separate moments, but as one infinite pulse. And he is overwhelmed. Tears fill his eyes, not from sorrow, but from joy, from release, from recognition. He does not need an answer anymore. He has seen. Govinda bows to his friend, the ferryman, and walks away quietly, like a man reborn. And Siddhartha remains sitting by the river. He no longer asks. He no longer wants. He simply is. And that, somehow, is the answer to every question he ever had. In this stillness, Hermann Hesse brings his narrative to a close, not with a climax, but with peace. Siddhartha's journey is not a triumph over the world, nor a conquest of self, but a return to the selfless flow of being. He began as a proud Brahmin son, full of knowledge, trained in rituals and words. But knowledge was not wisdom. He left in search of truth, joined the ascetics, sought nirvana through denial. But self-denial was still the self in disguise. He met the Buddha, felt his presence, but chose not to follow. Even perfection, when borrowed, cannot replace personal experience. He embraced the world, sought pleasure, wealth, and desire, lived the life of the senses. But desire, too, grew hollow. He nearly ended it all, but the river saved him. The river didn't preach. It reflected. It held everything, birth and death, joy and loss, together. The path to truth, the book seems to say, isn't found in renouncing life or embracing it, but in living it fully, deeply, with awareness. The moment Siddhartha stopped seeking, he found. He didn't need a guru, a scripture, or a philosophy. He needed only the space to listen, to himself, to the world, to the river that sings of oneness in every ripple. Siddhartha's story is deceptively simple and profoundly deep. It's not about converting to Buddhism or rejecting material life. It's about the journey each of us takes to find out who we are and what that even means. The book doesn't give answers. It gives presence. It invites you to sit, breathe, observe, and become. And in today's world, where speed and noise often drown out stillness. That may be the most radical thing of all. To be still, to listen, to become. With the story complete, the second part of our journey begins, one that unfolds not across rivers and palaces, but in the quiet space of reflection. Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse is deceptively short and fluid, like the river that defines it, but within its pages lie vast oceans of meaning. This is not a book you simply read. It's a book you sit with, like you might sit beneath a Bodhi tree or beside a fire after a long night's walk. It asks nothing but presence, and in return, it offers everything. Let's begin by exploring why this book belongs in level 4 of our journey, becoming you. This level is all about self-discovery, confronting the boundaries of identity, pulling apart the stitched labels that define us: student, lover, seeker, sinner, and asking, who am I when all these are stripped away? Hesse's Siddhartha is the quintessential example of this internal pilgrimage. The character Siddhartha moves through different lives and roles like a soul changing robes, each one necessary, each one incomplete. But the movement isn't linear. He doesn't progress in the way we're used to seeing in modern stories. He spirals. He returns. He repeats mistakes. He sheds skins only to pick up new ones. It's this refusal to flatten his journey that makes it so deeply human. Now, to understand how Siddhartha achieves such resonance, we must also understand Hermann Hesse himself. Born in 1877 in Germany, Hesse grew up in a household of missionaries and scholars steeped in both Christian theology and Indian philosophy. This fusion, East and West, shaped his worldview. And during a personal crisis in the early 20th century, Hesse traveled to India. Though the trip left him disillusioned with the reality of colonial India, it planted in him a seed, a hunger for something transcendent, something beyond dogma. Siddhartha is the flowering of that seed. Written in 1922, after the First World War and the death of Hesse's son, this book is not a mere intellectual exercise. It is grief transformed into wisdom. It is the quiet answer to a world torn by violence and despair. It whispers, you are more than what they told you. Truth is not out there. It is within. The novel structure mirrors this message. It flows in two arcs, the outward journey into the world and the inward journey into the self. The first half sees Siddhartha seeking teachers, the Brahmins, the Samamas, the Buddha himself. But each time he walks away, not because their teachings are false, but because they are not his truth. The second half brings him into the realm of the senses: pleasure, wealth, family, pain. Again, he walks away, only at the river. After all the seeking has exhausted itself, does he find what he was looking for? A state beyond seeking. This is where the book's brilliance lies. It does not devalue the search. It honors it. But it tells us the search must die for the seeker to be born. And this is deeply aligned with level 4 thinking. We are no longer children absorbing stories of good and evil, nor are we simply playing roles within society's structure. We are peeling back the layers, learning that even our most sincere quests can be ego in disguise. Even our spirituality can be performance. Even our detachment can become another form of control. Siddhartha learns this, and so must we. Now, let's talk about language. Hesse writes with a stillness that mirrors the content. The prose is spare but not cold. It's lyrical but never ornate. Every word feels intentional, like a rock placed in a Zen garden. There are no wasted metaphors, no showy similes. Just rhythm, breath, quiet flow. And structure? Hesse gives us chapters that mirror stages of life. Childhood, wandering, love, despair, renewal. Each one is a koan, a riddle wrapped in narrative. You can read the book in a single sitting or carry it with you for years. Like the river, it changes as you do. Then there's the spiritual dimension, not just Buddhist, though that's its overt wrapping. There's Hinduism here, yes, and Taoism in the way Siddhartha surrenders to the flow. But there's also mystic Christianity, German Romanticism, and echoes of Jungian psychology before it was popularized. It's a spiritual hybrid, not a map, but a mirror. It doesn't preach a path. It lets you see your own. And that is perhaps the greatest triumph of Siddhartha. It doesn't try to make you into anything. It simply says, you are already what you seek, but you must unlearn before you can remember. So many modern self-help books offer 10 steps, 12 rules, 5 principles. Siddhartha offers none. No steps, no checklist, no promise of success. Only water, only reflection, only this moment. And that's why, more than a century after it was written, this book still pulses with life. It's why seekers, students, mystics, and wanderers return to it when the noise of the world becomes too loud, when they're tired of grasping, when they're ready to let go. Siddhartha is not an answer. It is a space. And in that space, something sacred stirs. Siddhartha's awakening by the river marks the quiet but profound start of the second arc in his life. This river is no longer just a place of passage. It becomes a presence, a teacher. And it is here at this quiet bank where the true lessons begin, not from words but from listening to the river's endless voice, to life's ceaseless pulse, to the echoes of his own being. Vasudeva, the humble ferryman, re-enters the story here not as a mere helper, but as the silent guide Siddhartha never knew he needed. Vasudeva does not preach. He does not instruct. Instead, he listens, truly listens. And when he speaks, it's with the patience of one who has watched time pass without needing to grasp it. He invites Siddhartha to stay and work with him. Together, they ferry people across the river. And in this repeated, unassuming task, row across, row back, row again, Siddhartha finds rhythm. He finds peace not by retreating from life or mastering it, but by participating in it fully, humbly. The river is always changing. It reflects the sun, the stars, the sorrow of the traveler, the quiet of the monk. And Siddhartha learns to listen not just to it, but through it. He begins to hear all voices, the laughter of children, the weeping of lovers, the quiet sigh of death, as one great unity. The river becomes a metaphor, but more than that, it becomes experience. It shows Siddhartha that time is illusion, that all is now, that every sorrow has already turned into peace, every mistake already forgiven in the flow. This is where Siddhartha begins to embody wisdom, not just understand it. And this is where level 4 readers, those walking the difficult path of self-discovery, find a mirror for their own journeys. We spend much of our lives chasing after identity. We strive to be something: successful, spiritual, enlightened, good. But in doing so, we often miss the sacredness of being itself. Siddhartha does not become a guru. He becomes a man who can listen. And this act of deep listening, without judgment, without grasping, becomes the center of his transformation. Years pass by the river. One day, a young man arrives, angry, resistant, filled with grief and pride. It's Siddhartha's son. Kamala, Siddhartha's former lover, has died on her journey to find him, and the boy is left in his care. The reunion is not joyful. It is painful, strained, human. Siddhartha wants to love the boy, to connect, to guide him. But the boy resents him, refuses him, mocks the simplicity of his life. He longs for the city, for wealth, for pleasure, for everything Siddhartha has renounced. And here comes the true test of Siddhartha's enlightenment. Can he love and let go? Can he witness his son's suffering without needing to fix it? Can he see his own reflection in the boy's rebellion? For the first time in years, Siddhartha suffers again. He weeps. He longs. He clings. But slowly, through the voice of the river and the silent presence of Vasudeva, he learns to surrender even this. He watches the boy leave, watches him disappear into the world. And in the echo of that loss, he hears the river whisper, "Everything returns. Nothing is truly gone. All flows. All connects." This surrender deepens Siddhartha's wisdom. It tempers it with compassion, because insight without suffering is incomplete. He has now walked through desire, through despair, through love, loss, and loneliness. And he has emerged not above it, but through it. When Vasudeva senses that Siddhartha has truly arrived, not just in location, but in spirit, he leaves, quietly, like the river itself. His work is done, his purpose fulfilled, and Siddhartha is left alone, not empty, not afraid, full, still, whole. It is in this final stretch of the novel that Govinda, Siddhartha's old friend, returns once more. A lifetime has passed. Govinda has remained a monk, a disciple of the Buddha, faithful to the path of discipline and renunciation. But he still feels a lack, still senses that truth has eluded him. And when he meets Siddhartha again, now aged, serene, luminous, he's struck by something he cannot explain. They speak of teachings, of paths, of the limitations of words. Siddhartha does not dismiss Govinda's journey. He honors it, but he invites him to go beyond doctrine, beyond names, beyond opposites. He invites him to see, not think, not believe, but see. And in a moment of final grace, Siddhartha allows Govinda to kiss his forehead. And in that kiss, Govinda sees what cannot be spoken. All of life, all of time, all of sorrow and joy and form and formlessness intertwine in the face of his friend. He sees unity. He sees the truth that Siddhartha has become, not taught, but lived. And with that, the novel ends. Not with an explosion, not with a revelation, but with stillness. A stillness that echoes through the reader long after the final page is turned. As the final chapters of Siddhartha settle into silence, they invite us to breathe with the book rather than read it, to listen more than interpret. We've walked with Siddhartha from the lush gardens of his youth, through cities pulsing with desire, into the desert of despair, and finally, to the still waters of the river. What remains is not a resolution, but a resonance. And in that resonance lies the true gift of the novel. Let's begin by stepping back from the plot, from the movement of characters and scenes, and instead ask the question, why does this book move us so deeply? What gives it this glowing simplicity, this whisper of eternity wrapped in so few words? At its heart, Siddhartha is not a book about Buddhism, though the Buddha appears. It's not a book about rejecting wealth or renouncing pleasure, though both are explored. It is a book about the journey of becoming someone, and then becoming no one. Shedding every borrowed identity, surrendering even the desire for truth, and arriving gently in the still center of being. What makes this journey so profound is not its exotic setting or religious references, but its familiarity. Siddhartha's questions are our questions. His longing is ours. That ache to know what lies beyond the surface, to live more truthfully, more completely. That's what pulls us through these pages. And what makes Hesse's writing so enduring, so deeply human, is how he paints Siddhartha's transformation not as a single epiphany, but as a series of trials, each humbling, each clarifying. Siddhartha does not float from truth to truth like a detached observer. He dives in, he sins, he suffers, he fails, and through each failure, he becomes more human and, strangely, more whole. This is why the novel belongs in our Level 4 playlist, Becoming You. Because here, identity is not static, it is fluid. Each experience is a shedding of skin, a turning inward toward a truer self. And the final self that Siddhartha becomes is not fixed or nameable. It is an awareness that includes everything, a self that is no longer separate. Let's talk now about the symbolism at work. The river is not just water. It is time. It is memory. It is the illusion of linearity dissolved into presence. When Siddhartha first meets the river, he is still divided between thought and feeling, desire and asceticism. But as he lives with it, listens to it, he begins to become the river, to feel the oneness of past and future, of sorrow and joy. And this river flows through us too. Have you ever felt that moment when time seems to stretch and collapse? When your childhood sadness feels as real as your present breath? That's the river. That's the eternal now. And Hesse gives it to us not through a sermon, but through a ferryman with kind eyes and quiet words. Now, let's look at the character of Vasudeva. If Siddhartha is the seeker, Vasudeva is the witness. He does not teach through theories. He teaches through presence. through silence. His wisdom is not in what he says, but in the space he creates for others to see. In this way, he is the novel's purest embodiment of enlightenment, not as knowledge, but as being. There's a radical message in that, especially in our world where doing, achieving, proving dominate our days. Vasudeva's power lies in his stillness. He carries no doctrine, no ambition, and yet by simply being, he transforms lives. Which brings us to Govinda, Siddhartha's mirror. Govinda's journey is not lesser. It is sincere, devout, but it is narrow. He seeks truth through discipline, through attachment to a revered figure, the Buddha. He searches for salvation outside of himself. And in the end, it is Siddhartha, not the teacher Govinda followed, who offers him the glimpse of truth. That moment of the kiss is one of the most beautiful in literature, not because it resolves anything, but because it dissolves everything. In that kiss, Govinda sees the unity Siddhartha has become. He sees every form of life, human, animal, divine, flowing together in a single being. And in that moment, the seeker becomes still. Let's not forget the thematic subtlety here. Hesse does not reject religion, but he cautions against freezing it. Doctrines are like maps, but the river is the terrain. Siddhartha reminds us that truth is not found in worshiping the map. It's found by walking, by stumbling, by feeling every stone beneath your feet. That's why the novel feels so alive. It respects doubt. It honors experience. It embraces paradox. Siddhartha learns from wealth and poverty, from lust and love, from ego and its dissolution. No path is dismissed. Each is part of the whole, and that inclusivity is rare. It's what makes this work so nourishing for seekers of all kinds, whether religious, spiritual, or simply curious about what it means to be alive. In terms of literary structure, the novel is as elegant as it is sparse, divided into two parts, one tracing Siddhartha's outward journey, the other his inward return. It mirrors the arc of the hero's journey, but flips its climax. There's no final battle, no blazing enlightenment scene. The turning point is quiet. It's the moment Siddhartha chooses to stay, to listen, to serve. And perhaps the most radical message is this: you don't need to go anywhere to be whole. You don't need to abandon your life, your city, your struggles. The river is already here, flowing through each moment. And the wisdom it offers is not far away. It's as close as your own breath. So what are we left with at the end of this book? Not instructions, not conclusions, but a gentle sense of trust. That life, in all its confusion and beauty, is not something to solve. It's something to listen to be with. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Let's now turn our gaze to Hermann Hesse himself, the quiet architect behind Siddhartha, whose own life was a mirror of the spiritual journey he wrote. Born in Germany in 1877 to missionary parents, Hesse was no stranger to the pressure of inherited beliefs. His early life was shaped by both religion and rebellion, structure, and a simmering desire for self-definition. He wrestled with mental health struggles, spiritual crises, and a deep sense of being adrift in a world of expectations. These were not side notes to his work. They were the soil from which Siddhartha grew. Hesse was not preaching from a pedestal. He was searching from within. And that honesty bleeds into every word of the book. During World War I, while the world fractured under the weight of ideology, Hesse turned inward. He studied Eastern philosophies, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, not as exotic novelties, but as possible answers to questions Western systems hadn't satisfied. His interest wasn't academic. It was existential. He wasn't trying to compare doctrines. He was trying to heal. That's why Siddhartha feels different from many Western books about the East. It doesn't exoticize. It doesn't patronize. It listens. It absorbs. And then it transforms those ideas into a deeply personal story of one man's unfolding soul. In fact, Hesse once said that Siddhartha was a poem of India. And you can feel that poetic reverence in the prose, lush, minimal, vibrating with symbolism. But it's not just India he's writing about. It's the inner India, the dreamlike terrain of the spirit, that soft, glowing place beyond language, where the self loosens its boundaries and becomes more than itself. Let's look now at how Hesse structures the novel's spiritual logic. It begins with knowledge. Siddhartha is a Brahmin's son, deeply trained in Vedic teachings. But knowledge quickly reveals itself as insufficient. So he turns to self-denial, hoping that the destruction of the body might release the soul. But asceticism, too, grows hollow. Then comes experience, money, love, loss, despair. These are not mistakes. They are necessary. The soul, Hesse suggests, must live fully in the world before it can transcend it. The road to wisdom is not purity. It's integration. This is the core of the novel's spirituality, non-duality. No more division between body and mind, desire and detachment, sacred and profane. All is part of the same whole. The river does not judge the stones it carries. It simply flows. And in that flow, Siddhartha finally surrenders, not in defeat, but in peace. Let's pause here and feel that shift. So many of us, in our own quiet moments, carry the weight of should. I should be more disciplined. I should be wiser by now. I should be free of this doubt, this fear, this craving. But Siddhartha whispers something different, something softer. What if every part of your journey, the detours, the dead ends, even the shame, is not a problem, but a path? What if the self isn't a thing to perfect, but a river to ride? This is why the novel belongs so beautifully to level 4, becoming you. Because it dares to say that you is not a destination. It's an unfolding, an emergence, a gentle blooming from within. No one else can define it for you. No one else can rush it. Even the Buddha, with all his wisdom, could not give Siddhartha what he needed, not because he lacked compassion, but because some truths can only be lived. Let's also touch on the novel's language. Hesse's prose is meditative, rhythmic. You can feel the breath between sentences. There's a reason this book is often read slowly, in silence, beside a window or a river. It invites stillness. Its words are not aggressive. They don't push. They wait for you. This style is rare. In a world addicted to drama, to climaxes and twists, Siddhartha dares to be quiet. It trusts the reader's depth. It assumes you don't need to be dazzled. You just need to be reminded of what you already know. And that's perhaps the most beautiful thing about this book. It doesn't give answers. It helps you remember. The way the river helps Siddhartha remember his own soul. Now, let's briefly consider its cultural impact. When Siddhartha was first published in 1922, it didn't cause a massive stir. But after World War II, especially during the 1960s, it found a new audience. Young people searching for meaning beyond capitalism, nationalism, and traditional religion. For many, this book was a gateway into spiritual exploration, into yoga, meditation, Eastern thought. But more importantly, it became a mirror, a quiet place to ask, who am I really? And what if I don't have to be anyone? Its influence is still felt today, not just in literature, but in therapy rooms, spiritual retreats, late-night journal entries. Anywhere someone is tired of pretending, tired of proving, and ready to simply be, which brings us, finally, to a small but profound truth this book offers. Wisdom is not in answers, but in listening, not in control, but in surrender, not in fleeing the world, but in seeing it fully. In every falling leaf, in every broken promise, in every sunrise that feels like a gift you didn't earn, there is the river. There is the truth. And maybe that's the final lesson. You are not behind. You are not lost. You're just becoming the river. Let's dwell here a moment, shall we? Because in Siddhartha, the river isn't just a place. It's a presence. It breathes. It remembers. It listens. This is where Siddhartha's final and most important transformation takes root. After the years of wealth, sensual indulgence, despair, and suicidal thought, he returns to the river. The same river he once crossed with the silent ferryman, Vasudeva. But now it feels different. It isn't just water. It's wisdom. He collapses beside it, spends hours simply listening, watching, breathing. And what he begins to notice is something so quietly revolutionary. It slips past the intellect and into the soul. The river speaks. It speaks not in words, but in currents. It tells him that all things are connected, that every drop flows into the next and back again, that there is no true beginning and no true end. The river is time and timelessness. It is life as it really is, unbroken, unjudging, eternal. And when Siddhartha finally hears that all voices of joy, pain, laughter, crying, birth, and death are just one voice, he smiles. He has arrived, not at an answer, but at peace. This moment marks the shift from seeking to seeing. Remember the young Brahmin boy at the start of the story? The one restless with questions, chasing enlightenment like a finish line? That boy is gone. Not because he found what he was looking for, but because he stopped needing to look. He learned to be. And a large part of this realization comes through Vasudeva, the ferryman. Vasudeva. Rarely has a literary character said so little and meant so much. He is not a sage, not a teacher, not a hero. He is quite simply presence. Stillness. He listens, not just with his ears, but with his whole being. Siddhartha becomes his assistant, helps ferry people across the river, day in, day out. And slowly, he begins to learn not through ideas, but through rhythm, repetition, relationship. We often imagine spiritual growth as dramatic, as fireworks. But Hesse shows us another path, spiritual deepening through service, through attention, through surrender to the ordinary. And Vasudeva, without fanfare, leads Siddhartha to this realization. He points to the river not as an object, but as a guide. And when Siddhartha finally understands, when he becomes part of the flow, Vasudeva smiles and disappears into the forest, his work complete. It's such a gentle exit, isn't it? No applause, no farewell speech, just silence, just peace. Let's talk about that silence. There's a moment in the book when Siddhartha tries to explain what he's learned to his old friend Govinda. Govinda, ever the faithful seeker, still clings to doctrine. He still wants words, proof. But Siddhartha tells him that words are like illusions. They divide the world into this and that, good and bad, sacred and profane. But the truth, Siddhartha says, is all things at once. You can't teach that. You can only live it, feel it, be it. And then comes the book's final image. Govinda kisses Siddhartha's forehead, and in that moment of contact, he sees everything. Birth, death, gods, beggars, joy, despair, animals, stars, the river, the laughing Buddha, all flickering in and out of each other, like 1,000 flames dancing on the same surface. And suddenly, Govinda understands, not with his mind, but with his being. That's how the book ends. Not with a bang, but with awakening. Let's pull back now and consider why this story remains so potent. At its heart, Siddhartha is about the futility of borrowed truth. It doesn't mock religion. It reveres it. But it also insists that no path, no practice, no teacher can substitute for the inner journey. You must live, stumble, weep, laugh, and finally listen. Only then does wisdom arise. This is why the novel has resonated with readers for over a century. Not because it gives spiritual advice, but because it invites spiritual courage. It tells you, don't just read about rivers. Go sit beside one. Don't just admire saints. Learn from suffering. And above all, trust your own experience. Which brings us to a deeper theme, the illusion of duality. So much of Siddhartha's pain comes from splitting the world into opposites. Sacred versus worldly, pure versus impure, self versus other. But what the river teaches is unity. That within every joy is the seed of sorrow. That within every loss is a hidden gain. Hesse didn't invent this idea. It echoes through Taoism, Buddhism, even quantum physics. But he translated it into a story Western minds could feel. And in doing so, he gave us a gift, a reminder that your path is your own, that no one can walk it for you, that even your darkest detours are sacred, because the river never stops flowing. It accepts every stone, every leaf, every fallen tree. It accepts you. And maybe that's the final miracle, that a story written over a century ago can still hold your heart so gently, whispering, "You are not broken. You're becoming. The river has you. Let go. Let's breathe together for this next part." We've journeyed with Siddhartha through asceticism and indulgence, pride and despair, thought and stillness. Now, it's time to cradle the book's afterglow. Its quiet, timeless brilliance that lingers far beyond the final page. Because here's the truth: Siddhartha isn't just a story. It's a mirror. What you see in it depends on who you are when you read it. For a seeker, it offers clues. For a sufferer, it offers solace. For the thinker, it offers a gentle challenge. And for the sleeper, the one lying right now, with eyes half closed, it offers something softer, a lullaby in the form of wisdom. So let's reflect on what makes this book a beacon of self-discovery, why it so perfectly belongs to level 4, becoming you. That's the phase of life when you realize, maybe for the first time, that the path others handed you doesn't fit your feet. You start a question, not out of rebellion, but out of necessity. You wonder, what if success isn't satisfaction? What if spiritual devotion isn't peace? What if all these voices, family, tradition, society, are too loud to hear your own? In Siddhartha, Hermann Hesse doesn't just ask these questions. He lets them bloom into a life. He dares to write a protagonist who refuses to settle for anyone else's answers. Not the Sammas, not the Buddha, not even his own father. And in doing so, Siddhartha becomes the archetype for everyone who has ever asked, "Who am I, really?" The structure of the novel mirrors that question beautifully. First, there's the outer journey, the physical movement from one place to another, from city to forest to palace to river. It mirrors what many of us go through: changing careers, partners, ideologies, searching for the thing that will finally feel right. But beneath that is the inner arc. It's subtler, deeper. It doesn't care much for setting. It unfolds in the pauses, in the sighs, in the moments Siddhartha stops running and just listens to silence, to suffering, to love, to life. This is where Hermann Hesse shows his brilliance. He doesn't beat you over the head with grand declarations. He whispers. He trusts that the reader, like Siddhartha, will arrive not through force, but through stillness. And that's one of the most radical aspects of the novel. It's not about achievement. It's about awakening. There's no grand spiritual climax, no temple at the end, no enlightenment trophy, just a man, a river, and the deep hum of unity. That's it. And somehow, it's enough. Let's also talk about the prose. It's deceptively simple. Short sentences, gentle rhythm, almost childlike clarity. But don't let that fool you. It takes a master to write with such restraint. Hesse doesn't waste a word. Every paragraph breathes. It gives you space to feel, to wander, to see yourself reflected. And isn't that the goal of great literature? To dissolve the line between the page and your life. To show you that maybe, just maybe, your longing isn't a flaw, but a compass. Let's return for a moment to that final vision Govinda has when he kisses Siddhartha's forehead. It's dazzling, overwhelming. He sees birth and death, gods and beasts, pain and joy, all swirling into each other like drops in a single current. And it leaves him not panicked, not euphoric, but calm, because he understands that the universe is not trying to explain itself. It's just being. So why do we try so hard to name everything? To pin it down? That's a question this book asks us again and again. And maybe, just maybe, the answer is stop trying, stop naming, stop splitting. Instead, observe, listen, accept. The river doesn't reject the dirt or the rain or the drowning man or the thirsty traveler. It holds them all. It keeps moving. And in doing so, it teaches. That's why Siddhartha doesn't become a teacher. He doesn't write a book. He doesn't start a school. He simply lives. Fully. Silently. Deeply. And that's why his final smile is so radiant. It's the smile of someone who has made peace with every version of himself, who no longer fears the world or the self or the past, who understands that love is not possession, that knowledge is not truth, and that time is not linear. He is the river now, still, moving, timeless. As you lie here, maybe with your breath slowing, your thoughts drifting, you can feel a little of that river, can't you? The current beneath your chest, the stillness behind your eyes. That's the power of a book like Siddhartha. It doesn't end when the last page turns. It lingers in your heartbeat. It changes how you walk, how you watch the sky, how you sip your tea. So tonight, if your mind starts to spin again, if you find yourself grasping at answers, remember, you don't need to know everything. You just need to listen. The river will carry the rest. The river is not just a setting. It is the soul of the novel. In Siddhartha, Hermann Hesse builds something rare, a story where the climax is stillness, and the hero's great triumph is not conquest, but understanding. And this understanding doesn't come from a guru's sermon or a scholar's book. It comes from a river, a literal body of water, flowing endless, voiceless, and yet a teacher more profound than any sage. This, right here, is where Siddhartha reveals its genius. Because by choosing the river as the novel's final teacher, Hesse makes a subtle, astonishing move. He shifts the quest from external knowledge to internal resonance, from ideas to intuitions, from effort to being. The river doesn't explain things. It doesn't have doctrines or commandments. It just is. And yet, Siddhartha learns more from it than he ever did from ascetics or from the enlightened one himself. That tells us something. That maybe, just maybe, truth isn't something spoken. It's something absorbed. Think of how Siddhartha watches the water, listens to it, meditates by its side. He hears laughter and weeping in its current. He sees birth and death folding into each other. He recognizes that all things return, and that all things, in some way, already are each other. The old ferryman, Vasudeva, never preaches. He listens. He smiles. And eventually, when his time has come, he leaves, not to die, not to vanish, but to become one with the river. It's not an end. It's a continuation. You begin to understand what Hesse is telling us. He's offering a spiritual blueprint, not how to get somewhere, but of how to stop running. The book's final third is so quiet compared to the beginning. It's no longer about adventures or risks or seductions. It's about presence, routine, kindness, deep listening, and love. Yes, love, because perhaps the softest yet most powerful thread running through Siddhartha is his slow, painful, humbling discovery of love. He tries to escape it through philosophy, through sensuality, through stoic solitude, but it returns like a tide. He loves Kamala. He loves his son, even when that love is unreciprocated and raw. And ultimately, he loves the world, not selectively, not only the beautiful parts, all of it, the dying bird, the bitter pain of loss, the selfishness of others, the past mistakes that haunt him, the pride that once blinded him. He loves all of it, and that is the true mark of spiritual awakening. Not detachment, but embrace. To see suffering and not recoil. To see beauty and not cling. To see yourself, at last, as simply part of it all, not more important than the stars, but not less either. This is what Siddhartha becomes. And this is what we, perhaps, can become too. Let's step back now, gently, and look at this book as a whole. Its structure is elegant and deceptively simple, just like its language. The novel is short, barely over 100 pages, but it spans an entire lifetime. Each section feels like a different incarnation. Young Siddhartha, proud and brilliant. Ascetic Siddhartha, starving and searching. Sensual Siddhartha, wealthy and lost. And finally, River Siddhartha, whole and silent. You see, he dies many times before the end. Each time he lets go of a previous self, it's a kind of death and rebirth. He doesn't resist these deaths. He doesn't mourn them. He allows them. And that is perhaps the deepest truth the novel offers. If you wish to become yourself, you must be willing to die again and again into deeper forms of presence, honesty, and peace. Let's not forget Hesse's own life in all this. He wrote Siddhartha after undergoing a period of immense personal suffering. Depression, the death of his son, the collapse of his marriage, all cracked open his previous worldview. In that space of brokenness, he encountered Eastern philosophy, especially Indian mysticism and Buddhist thought. But he didn't just mimic it. He synthesized it. Hesse takes East and West, logic and intuition, narrative and stillness, and creates something uniquely his. That's why Siddhartha isn't just a Buddhist novel. It's a deeply human one. It doesn't ask you to convert or chant or shave your head. It simply asks you to listen to your life, to notice where you're restless, to notice where you're pretending, to notice, most of all, the river beneath it all, the one flowing through your chest, your memories, your fears, your dreams. The river that says, stop seeking. You're already here. As you lie there, possibly with your mind floating gently between wakefulness and sleep, let this message soak in, not as advice, but as presence. Let go of the effort, the striving, the comparison. You are enough as you are. Like Siddhartha, you have passed through many forms, some proud, some painful, some beautiful, and still the river holds them all. And yet, Siddhartha's journey is not complete without one last, tender trial, the return of his son. This child, born of Kamala, carries in him all the fire and rebellion of Siddhartha's younger self, but without the years of seeking. He's angry, spoiled, wounded, and most of all, he wants nothing to do with his father. Siddhartha, now the ferryman, tries to love him, tries to guide him, tries to offer the peace he's found, but the boy rejects it, fiercely, painfully, and perhaps that's exactly what needed to happen. You see, Siddhartha learns here what no philosophy, no meditation, no river could ever teach: the ache of loving someone who does not love you back. Not out of cruelty, but out of difference. The boy is not ready. His path must be forged through cities, chaos, and pride, just like his father's once was. And Siddhartha, though heartbroken, begins to see this. He does not try to force love. He lets it go. It's a turning point, not of action, but of acceptance. Because loving someone also means releasing them, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. This is a lesson many of us spend lifetimes learning, that we cannot save others, not our children, not our friends, not even those we love with all our being. They must save themselves. All we can offer is presence and patience. Like the river, the boy eventually runs away, leaving Siddhartha devastated. For days, he walks the forest, returning again and again to where the boy once stood. He waits, he hopes, he grieves, and finally he stops waiting. He listens again to the river, and the river whispers, "Let it be." This scene, quiet as it is, contains an entire world of emotional weight. Siddhartha's identity as a father, something he barely understood until recently, is torn from him. But instead of hardening, he softens. Instead of clinging, he bows. And in that bow, he becomes whole. It's worth pausing here to acknowledge what a rare kind of narrative this is. Most stories center around achievement. Hero gets the prize. Hero defeats the villain. Hero wins the girl. But Siddhartha's story? It centers around surrender. Hero loses everything. Hero questions everything. Hero listens, forgives, and fades into a wider silence. This is the beauty of Hesse's work. He doesn't dramatize enlightenment. He distills it. He gives us not fireworks, but a candle in the dark. And this candle shines most brightly in the final pages, when Govinda, Siddhartha's old friend and spiritual companion, returns. Years have passed. Govinda, still a monk, still a seeker, hears rumors of a wise ferryman who lives by the river and speaks like the Buddha himself. Curious, and perhaps a little desperate, Govinda travels there and finds Siddhartha. The reunion is delicate, quiet, like two old birds landing on the same branch. Govinda doesn't recognize him at first, and when he does, he's stunned, because Siddhartha, who once renounced doctrine and ridiculed seekers, now radiates a peace Govinda has never seen. And Govinda, dear devoted Govinda, asks the question we've all been asking. How? How did you find it? Siddhartha doesn't answer with theory. He doesn't cite scriptures. He doesn't even claim to have answers. Instead, he offers Govinda the river, a smile, a moment, and finally, something even more intimate. He asks Govinda to kiss his forehead. And when Govinda does, in that silent, trembling act of closeness, something opens. He sees the world not as broken pieces, not as good and evil, not as separate, but as one endless, flowing, unified whole. He sees the face of Siddhartha melt into many faces: child, old man, courtesan, sage. He sees death and birth as one. He sees everything, and he weeps. This is not conversion. This is not indoctrination. This is awakening. And it's offered not through words, but through presence. Siddhartha becomes a mirror, a river, a whisper of the divine. And Govinda, the one who always followed, finally arrives. Not because someone told him where to go, but because he stopped seeking and finally saw. This ending is not loud. It's not triumphant in the traditional sense, but it is luminous, and it tells us something vital, that spiritual truth is not found in theories. It's found in life itself, in holding a child, in watching a river, in feeling your heart break, and still choosing to love. Siddhartha teaches not through instruction, but through being, and that perhaps is the purest form of wisdom. And now that we've gently closed the door on the final act of Siddhartha's story, we enter the second part of our journey tonight, one of reflection. Because as quiet and unassuming as Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha may seem on the surface, this book pulses with a radiant kind of power, the kind that doesn't just linger in your mind, but resettles the way your soul perceives the world. Let's begin with the structure. Siddhartha is, on one level, a Bildungsroman, a coming-of-age story. But unlike the conventional Western narrative arc where the protagonist gains mastery over something external, Siddhartha's journey is inward. He begins as a brilliant, respected Brahmin's son, yet what drives the story isn't a quest for glory or romance, but an aching, almost spiritual dissatisfaction, a kind of metaphysical thirst that no ritual, no doctrine, no teacher seems to quench. This is the first great philosophical thread of the novel. That truth, real truth, is not given. It must be lived. And so, Siddhartha sets off, not with a map, but with a question. What is the nature of the self? And how does one dissolve suffering? His path is neither linear nor neat. He meets saints and sinners, wise men and fools. He tries asceticism and indulgence, discipline and abandon. And each phase, each failure, contributes not to a destination, but to a deepening. This mirrors the ancient idea from Eastern traditions that the path to enlightenment is not a ladder upward, but a spiral inward. What makes Siddhartha extraordinary is how it presents these themes with such lightness of hand. Hesse doesn't lecture. He listens. Through Siddhartha, he allows us to breathe in the questions rather than suffocate under answers. It's here the book reveals its level 4 brilliance, its alignment with the stage of becoming. Level 4, if you've been following our books for sleep playlists, is the point where we start peeling back the identities we inherited from the world. It's when the roles we play, student, son, citizen, start to feel too tight. We begin to ask, who am I when I am no longer trying to be someone? And this is exactly the terrain Siddhartha walks. What's more, he walks it alone, not because he doesn't love others, but because the kind of transformation he seeks cannot be outsourced. Teachers, doctrines, even the Buddha himself, Siddhartha, bows to them, honors them, but continues on, not out of arrogance, but because he must experience truth, not just believe it. Hesse beautifully illustrates this in the scene with the Buddha. It's one of the most understated yet profound moments in the novel. Siddhartha recognizes the Buddha's radiance, the peace that flows from his every gesture. But he also realizes something else, that what the Buddha has found cannot be taught. It can only be realized. And so, he does not become a disciple. He bows and leaves. This, for many readers, is both maddening and illuminating. It challenges our deeply held belief that spiritual truth can be handed down like a recipe. Siddhartha whispers instead, walk the path, stumble, bleed, laugh, lose. There is no substitute for your own lived experience. The river becomes a symbol of this, not just for change, but for constancy within change. The river flows forward and yet remains. It reflects and absorbs. It listens. And in the river, Siddhartha finally hears what no teacher could say. That time is an illusion. That every soul is part of the same vast tapestry. That the divisions between joy and sorrow, life and death, are all waves on the same surface. The river doesn't speak in language. It speaks in presence. And it's in this silent presence that Siddhartha awakens. We could spend hours, whole books, unpacking the metaphors here. But let's stay with the emotional heart for a moment. The beauty of Siddhartha is not just in its philosophy, it's in its humanity. The ache of love, the pain of letting go, the fierce joy of being alive. Siddhartha touches all of this, and he doesn't conquer these emotions. He allows them. Even the relationship with his son, so tragic and tender, is not presented as a moral parable. It's simply a truth. Sometimes love is not enough to keep people close. Sometimes we must let others walk away, even from our open arms. There's something heartbreakingly wise in that. And Hermann Hesse knew this. Born into a religious family, steeped in both Western and Eastern thought, he struggled throughout his life with the tension between belief and freedom, discipline and inner truth. Siddhartha was not just a novel. It was a spiritual confession. It's no surprise that the book resonated so deeply with the counterculture movements of the 1960s and 70s. It offered a vision of truth unshackled from institutions, a path carved not by obedience, but by listening, by quiet, by solitude. But don't mistake this book for a rejection of the world. It's not. Siddhartha doesn't retreat from life. He embraces it fully. He learns from hunger, from lust, from gold, from grief. And when he finally sits by the river, it is not because he has escaped life, but because he has finally become part of it. Whole, still, and luminous. It's one thing to admire a book. It's another to feel like it changed you. Siddhartha has this quiet, uncanny power, not because it preaches, but because it trusts. It trusts the reader to sit with paradox, to move through confusion, to let meaning rise slowly, like mist off the riverbanks. Let's talk about Hesse's writing style, because it's essential to the experience of the book. It's deceptively simple. The sentences flow like water, measured, unhurried, often luminous. There are no verbal fireworks, no clever twists or dramatic outbursts. And yet, the prose glows. It invites you to lean in, to read more slowly, to breathe with the text. This restraint is not accidental. Hesse crafted Siddhartha to echo the calm rhythm of spiritual texts, especially Eastern sutras. There's a clarity to the cadence, a stillness between the lines. And in that stillness, space opens, not just for thought, but for transformation. It's this space that elevates Siddhartha to timelessness. There are many books about journeys, many books about awakening, but few offer the reader a felt experience of that awakening. Reading Siddhartha feels like meditation. Now, let's shift to character development, which at first might seem flat. Siddhartha doesn't go through the dramatic personality shifts you'd expect from a Western protagonist. He doesn't conquer flaws or triumph over villains. But this is exactly the point. His transformation is internal, silent, almost invisible from the outside. He begins not as someone weak or foolish, but as someone incomplete. And don't we all begin that way? Even characters like Govinda, who mirror Siddhartha along the journey, serve not just as companions, but as reflections of our own yearning. Govinda searches for truth and devotion. He wants to follow, to believe, but he always lags one step behind Siddhartha, not because he's lesser, but because his path is secondhand. It's only in the end, with a kiss to Siddhartha's forehead, that Govinda receives the gift he's been chasing. Truth, not as a concept, but as presence. And this scene, this quiet final scene, might be the most moving moment in the book. No grand enlightenment, no thundering epiphany, just a realization that truth is not a point on a map. It's a way of being, a way of seeing. Even Kamala, the courtesan who teaches Siddhartha about love, serves as a symbol for the necessity of experiencing the full range of human emotion. Their relationship is sensual, tender, even sacred in its own way. But it's also transient, and that's another lesson. Nothing, not even beauty or love, is meant to be clutched too tightly. Everything flows. Even the city, with its gold and luxury, teaches Siddhartha something. It seduces him, distracts him, but eventually it drains him. He becomes spiritually sick. And again, this is not presented with scorn or puritanical judgment. Hesse simply shows this, too, is a part of the path. Sometimes you have to lose yourself before you can know who you are. The river is waiting. Let's also reflect on the philosophical depth of the book. Siddhartha draws from both Hindu and Buddhist traditions. Yes, but it isn't a religious manual. It's more like a spiritual mirror. Its core message: don't worship the finger pointing at the moon. See the moon. And that's what Siddhartha does again and again. He resists dogma. He resists even the temptation of a ready-made path. Instead, he listens to his body, to his pain, to the river. And in doing so, he moves beyond opposites, beyond the binary of good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death. He enters a kind of harmony. This is where level 4, the playlist level of becoming you, feels so right. Because Siddhartha is not about having the answers. It's about living the questions. It's about becoming real, not successful, not righteous, just real. Hesse's own life echoes this. He struggled with depression, with spiritual alienation, with the pressure of fitting into inherited beliefs. Writing Siddhartha was, in many ways, a lifeline, a way of giving form to the formless, voice to the quiet yearning inside. And maybe that's why the book still resonates today. In a world that tells us constantly to do more, be more, prove more, Siddhartha whispers, be still. Listen, there's nothing to prove. It's a revolutionary softness. And this softness makes the book incredibly radical. In its refusal to declare one truth, in its embrace of the bow slash, and in its suggestion that you're already enough, you just haven't remembered yet. Let's not forget, too, the book's subtle social critique. By portraying organized religion, wealth, knowledge, and even family ties as insufficient for deep spiritual fulfillment, Hesse challenges systems. He doesn't reject them outright, but he shows their limits. He shows that institutions, while useful, cannot replace the intimacy of personal insight. This is a brave message, and it's why Siddhartha is not just a spiritual novel. It's a profoundly human one. It meets you where you are and gently takes your hand. We've come a long way with Siddhartha, through forests and cities, through passion and poverty, through rivers that never stop flowing. And now we find ourselves where all journeys end, not at a destination, but at a kind of return. Not a solution, but an understanding. Let's now deepen our focus on what makes this book not just good, but quietly transformative. It's in the way it whispers rather than shouts, the way it honors doubt, the way it lets silence carry more meaning than speeches ever could. The structure of Siddhartha itself is remarkably symmetrical. Hesse divides the story into stages that mirror a spiritual path: departure, descent, awakening, return. This rhythm, like the river that runs through the story, reinforces the cyclical nature of life, learning, and transformation. In many ways, the book is not about Siddhartha as a character, but about you, me, us. You can feel that each chapter is not just a step forward in a plot, it's a step inward. It's less about what happens and more about how it happens, and how reshapes the soul. It also reminds us that awakening rarely comes in a flash. It's slow, subtle. It sneaks in through the cracks when we're not looking. It looks less like a mountaintop and more like a quiet evening by the water, where the heart, at last, stops fighting itself. That's what makes the river such a powerful symbol. It contains all opposites: movement and stillness, surface and depth, the past and the yet to come. It doesn't resist anything. And in that, it becomes a teacher greater than any monk or book or ritual. Siddhartha's final realization, sitting by the river, is one of those literary moments that imprints on the soul. He understands at last that all life is connected, not just in an abstract, poetic sense, but in a felt, undeniable truth. Every laugh, every wound, every leaf and pebble and bird call, they're all part of the same song. Govinda, who spent his life chasing enlightenment through tradition, misses this. He needs someone else to give it to him. But Siddhartha finds it in the curve of a smile, in a ripple on the water. This is the final teaching. You can't chase truth. You can only become quiet enough to hear it. And then there's the brilliant, almost invisible way the book ends. Not with a grand moral or climax, but with the image of Govinda kissing Siddhartha's brow and seeing everything. He sees all the lives, all the cycles, all the pain and beauty of existence reflected in Siddhartha's face. No words, no lecture, just one moment of perfect presence. It's astonishing, and it's why this book lives in the hearts of those who read it. Because it doesn't just tell a story. It invites a remembering, a return, a homecoming to something we've always known, but maybe forgotten in the noise of life. From a literary perspective, Siddhartha is also quietly radical. It blends Western novel form with Eastern spiritual philosophy in a way that was nearly unheard of when it was published in 1922. Hesse doesn't appropriate. He listens, absorbs, and honors. The result is not mimicry, but resonance. The themes of non-duality, compassion, inner stillness, and the illusion of ego are not presented as exotic curiosities. They're lived, felt, made real in the trembling of a leaf, in the cry of a grieving father, in the silence of a monk. And that's perhaps the book's greatest gift. It reminds us that truth doesn't live in theory. It lives in this moment, right now, in this breath, as you lie there in the softness of your sheets, as the fan hums gently in the background, as the world outside slows into stillness. The river flows through you too. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to become anyone. You're already part of the song. This is what Siddhartha discovered, not through study, but through surrender. And maybe in your own quiet way, you are discovering it too. Sometimes it's not about reaching the end, but learning how to rest in the middle. And right now, here, with your eyes soft and the air calm around you, you've reached a place not unlike the riverbank, a space where thoughts drift gently and nothing needs to be solved. Let the images of Siddhartha's journey dissolve into mist. The river still flows. The stars are still hanging quietly overhead. You don't have to hold on to any lesson or insight. Just let the silence cradle you. Let it be enough to know that stories like this exist. Stories that trust you, that move slowly, speak softly, and meet you where you are. Stories that don't shout answers, but hum questions. Your breath is steady. The bed beneath you a raft. You are not alone. You're not lost. The river has always known the way. So rest now. No more searching. Only this moment. Only this hush. Sweet dreams.